further insight. So please feel free to reach out to us post this session as well, in case you would like to gain more understanding on any of the products. Talking about Debra, I now welcome her warmly to this session, and I thank her for taking out time. Now, Debra is a highly experienced and an award-winning HR leader. She's a world-class speaker, three-time author, and was recently named one of the top 101 global employee engagement influencers. She had a varied career working for global companies such as Gap Incorporation, Honeywell, and Merlin Entertainments, where she developed and delivered HR strategies in a rebellious way, pushing the boundaries and challenging the status quo to truly drive employee engagement. In 2019, Debra founded her own company as Chief Pay It Forward Officer, where she's inspiring and helping others to bring out their inner rebel and drive business change. Over the course of her career, Debra has been fueling the employee engagement revolution through a variety of ways, including speaking at events, leading workshops around the world, teaching professional courses, and writing. An accomplished author, Debra has till now published 3 books. The first one about employee communication strategy and the best practice, and the book is known as Effective HR Communication, a framework for communicating HR programs with impact. The second one talks about why and how to be an engagement rebel, and the name of the book is Build It, a Rebel Playbook for World-Class Employee Engagement. And her latest book, which focuses on company values as a strategic and effective business tool, is named as Bringing Your Values Out to Play. Now, it's amazing, Debra. The subject sounds very, very interesting. I, for one, am going to add this to my reading list, and will be definitely going through this to learn a little bit more on enhancing engagement within the organization. Thank you so much for taking our time and taking up such an interesting topic for us for this webinar. I'm sure your insight is going to help us all. So over to you, Debra.
Thank you so much, Taruna, and thank you all for joining us today. I wanted to start out with a picture of me just so you can see me, and then I'm going to turn my video off so you don't have to look at me. Sometimes when people have seen my background, they think that I'm in my children's playroom, but actually this is my office. A very colorful, creative person, as you can probably see behind me. So let me turn that off so I don't distract you, and you can focus more on the presentation. So let me start out by saying that, as we all know, we are definitely living and working in unprecedented times when we're being confronted with challenges and obstacles and uncertainty that we rarely, if ever, have seen before. And I've been in HR for 30 years. And to make it even more challenging, as leaders and HR professionals, we're being asked to quickly address and resolve everything going on around us, putting in place plans to engage, motivate, and support our people in new ways, as they keep calling it the old normal, and the new normal has taken over. But I don't know about you. The biggest question that I have is, how do you do this? How do you support your business through your people? Well, that's exactly what I would love to share with you and discuss with you on this webinar, talking about how we can figure out what will work and also what won't work, how to reinvent ourselves to help our businesses and people survive, and hopefully a bit more than that. Okay, I have to figure out how to change my slides on this. Oh, there we go. So this is the agenda, what we're going to be covering on today's webinar. And we're going to be covering 5 topics, starting with employee engagement, focusing on why and how. And now you have to look at me again. Sorry about that. Why and how we need to redefine ourselves. And from here, what I'll move on to are 4 areas of engagement: communications, well-being, recognition, and then managers in the changing role. And these are all key areas of employee engagement normally, but even more so during this crisis. So before we jump into the details and the solutions, let's start with some of the headlines. So some of the things that are driving our strategies, our approaches, basically they're driving and changing our worlds. The first point is that we are all in it together. And what I mean by that is that for the first time, it doesn't matter what country we're in, what race, what gender, what age, every single one of us is facing this crisis. And this brings challenges, but it also brings opportunities, because many of us around the world are joining what people are starting to call the care and share community. And I've seen lots of this happening with people and companies doing things that in the past would never, ever have been done before. For example, I heard about a company in the US who lent some of their employees who weren't working to another company. Another company I spoke to in the Netherlands, they told me of how they're letting their employees who aren't working right now, who are off on leave, volunteer for critical roles in the community, and they're still paying for their salaries. The next point is that we can't continue doing things how we've done them in the past. And what I mean by this is that what may have worked in the past, in many, if not all situations, will not work in many situations in this new normal, which means that we should not jump into things without thinking them through. And let me give you an example of this. A friend of mine called me during the first week of lockdown, and he told me how frustrated he was with his company, because the company was asking him to spend all day inputting his annual performance goals. We know that time of the year when you have to do that. And he was really frustrated because he said to me, didn't they know that there were more important things to focus on, like sorting out how to set up his home office, how to arrange the homeschooling for his kids, even how he was going to do his shopping and get things into lockdown. And finally, how he was even going to use this online system, because he couldn't even get onto the performance management system. And as an HR person, I have to say I was actually embarrassed and frustrated when I heard that, because I thought, didn't these people know that they needed to take a step back and think about what was really important now? So my next 2 points have to do with our people and the need to understand and to respect them. The first point is that we need to respect where people are. And what I mean by this is that not every one of our employees will be in the same place. I was on a webinar the other week and the presenter said, we're all in the same boat. And as she said this, the hair on my arms stood up, as the expression goes, as I absolutely, positively did not agree with her. I think we're all, yes, in the same sea or maybe the same rough waters, but our boats are absolutely different. In a podcast that I was listening to that talked about grief, they explained that we're all going through something, as we've all lost something. But they went on to say that although we're going through collective grief, we all are going through individual grief. And their tips, which I think were really important, is that it's important to understand individual losses and individual changes and to understand and respect them equally. They're all important, they're all valid, and they're all legitimate. The next point is that we need to respect the different hurdles that people are facing. And what I mean by this is that every employee not only has different grief, but they're also facing very different hurdles. So different things that are actually getting in their way to get over the grief, to be engaged, to be motivated, and even to be productive. An example, both of my neighbors on either side of me, they have young children, and I know this because I can hear them every single day out in their back gardens. And for them, their biggest challenges and their biggest hurdles are to sort out how they're going to work from home, and at the same time, how they're going to homeschool their children and keep them entertained. Now, me, on the other hand, I've got 2 teenagers and 2 dogs. My dogs are sleeping behind me, and I'm hopeful that they will be quiet throughout this webinar. So I've got very, very different challenges. However, I've got a husband who is working full-time from home, and also my son who is in college, who is online trying to do things and to play on his computer, mostly playing on his computer and not working. So I've got very different challenges. For me, it's more about fighting over bandwidth. So who gets the bandwidth in the house and who can find the quietest space in the house to work. So the final point brings this all together. And it's that we need to quickly react and respond. With things changing every day, every week, and sometimes it feels like every minute, we have no time to sit around and analyze the situation and analyze the approach, although normally I love to analyze everything. We need to default to action and take steps to change how we engage, how we motivate, and how we support our people. So, starting with these 5 headlines that I've just gone through, I'd like you to think of them as your lens to look through when you're taking actions. So let's start thinking about and talking about what can you do. So let's start with employee engagement. Now, as we all know, employee engagement has been proven to impact company sales, company profit, turnover, the list goes on and on. But during the crisis, with the employee experience dramatically different than it ever was before, it's really important for us to take a step back and redefine what it means and also how we do it. Because employee engagement continues to have an important role. It's just that the rules of the game have definitely changed. So let's start with the definition of employee engagement. In my book, my second book on employee engagement, we defined an engaged employee in 3 ways. The first is that they understand and they believe in the direction of the company. Second, they understand how the role contributes to the success of the company. And then finally, they genuinely want the company to succeed. Now, these all still apply, which means that when we engage with our employees, we need to keep these in mind. But I also believe that there's another key way, a 4th element that's been added to the definition during the crisis. And that is that an engaged employee believes that their company cares and supports them. Now, you might be thinking to yourself that this was always a key part of employee engagement, and you were right. In fact, most of our engagement programs support this. But because of what's happening in the world, I felt that it was important that it needed to be elevated and move up actually into our definition, moving it higher in the hierarchy and higher in our focus and also in our attention. The other thing, speaking of hierarchy, the other thing that has changed is the order of drivers and motivators of employee engagement. You only have to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is on this slide right here. And if you had asked me before the crisis where I was spending most of my time helping companies with their engagement strategy and their programs, I would have said that it was probably in the higher parts of the pyramid, as the lower ones around the physiological and safety were already being met. But now that this has changed, with pretty much every employee worried about these lower or more fundamental elements, these are things that companies really need to go back and address and also weave them into other elements. By the way, I love this diagram, this image where somebody's written in Wi-Fi, even lower than food, water, shelter, and warmth. I think my son would agree with that. I did actually see another copy that had toilet paper at the bottom. But anyway, yes, our hierarchy of needs has definitely changed. So I wanted to validate this by showing you some more data. I mean, Maslow's hierarchy was developed back in 1943, so I thought we needed something a bit more current. And this is a survey that was done in the US just a few weeks ago. And in the survey, what they did is they asked employees what was top of their mind. So what were the key issues to them personally? And if you look on this slide in the blue box under top 4 issues, they said that the first one was financial security. 81% of them said that. Health and well-being, 56%. Family, 25%. And productivity and work, 20%. Now, although the survey was done in the US, there probably are similarities in your country and also with your employees. So the point of these slides on employee engagement and the key takeaways for you are to start by understanding at your company what the new definition of employee engagement is and what is the hierarchy of engagement for your employees. It's important to know specifically for your employees, and then use this information to help you determine and decide how best you can support and engage with your employees. So let's start with the first of the four elements that I said I was going to cover today. The first is communications. So communications has always been a key driver of employee engagement, but even so now, for a couple different reasons. Let me share with you from my perspective what I think these reasons are. First, communications reduces fear. It helps employees understand what's going on at their company and how it impacts them. It reduces some of the anxiety that they may have that's related to this whole fear of the unknown. The way I like to think about it is communication helps cut through the noise of uncertainty and of fear. Next, communication creates connections, something that is so important and so critical, and yet we have to admit it's very challenging for all of us in this current environment. And finally, communications builds trust, which is even more important now as our employees desperately need someone or something that they can trust to help them get through this all. It reminds me of the story of a little boy who fell into a well and was stuck on the bottom. And he was scared and he was crying until a rescue person came to the rescue. All the rescue worker had to do was start talking to the little boy, and he stopped crying. He felt safe just knowing that there was someone there with him and for him, and that he wasn't alone. And the same is true with our communications. It's our lifeline to our employees. So before I give you some ways that you can communicate effectively during the crisis, let me share with you a statistic from a Gallup report. Sorry, it's another one in the US, but the US seems to be the country that has most of the data right now. And the study found that 52% of employees feel strongly that their company has communicated a clear plan of action in response to COVID-19. The good news is that slightly more than half of employees feel that they've received clear communications, but the bad news is that almost half, so 48% of them, did not feel they received clear communications. And these are the basics. So if they're not getting the basics, they're living in fear, they're living in darkness, and they've got no lifeline to the rest of the world. So let's talk about how you can make sure that this does not happen at your company. I'm going to share with you 5 things or 5 tips to think about. First one is to communicate in an open and honest way. It really is the starting point for achieving your objectives, inviting your employees into your communications and inviting them to engage with them. It's so important because if you hide the truth from your employees, it will only create confusion, mistrust, and escalate fears, all of which are not good for your people and not good for your business. For this reason, it's absolutely critical that you are open and honest in how you communicate with your workforce, explaining why you've made decisions, what it'll mean to the business, and how it will impact them personally. Do not leave it to your employees to guess and to interpret. For most of the time, I have to say they won't get it right. And if you don't have an answer, you know what? That's okay. Just let them know this. Being open and honest is about what you say, but it's also about who says it. Over the years, I have to say I've been frustrated from time to time when a CEO or a business leader has asked me to deliver an important message because it doesn't feel genuine. It's almost like they're hiding something by not delivering it themselves. And in these challenging times, you don't want your employees to feel this way. So if possible, encourage your CEO to deliver the key business updates themselves. I interviewed a chocolate company who told me that during the crisis, they've started having their CEO or what they call their CEO, they call them their chief chocolate officer. They've had him share an update during the weekly calls. And they told me it was something that they've been wanting to do for a long time, but they just haven't gotten around to it. And it's been so valuable for their employees because their employees hear news, good and bad, directly from this chief chocolate officer. The next tip is to communicate in a more human way. The last thing you want your employees, or the last thing your employees want and need, are lengthy corporate messages that lack empathy and concern and authenticity. Because what they do, again, they lead to confusion and they lead to fear. So instead, communicate with a more human tone, putting yourself in their shoes to understand what they need and how you need them to feel. Think of it like the tone of voice that you use when you're talking to someone. For example, if one of my children, if I need them to feel safe, I would use a calming and I would use a loving voice. I wouldn't scream at them. So you want to do the same thing with your communications. Your words create some type of reaction. The tone can create trust, and it can appeal to your employee's heart. The next tip is about, there we go. Next tip is about leveraging your communication tools. And I'm sure you already have lots of ways that you communicate with your workforce. So it's important to leverage these, to use these in how you're going out and communicating to your employees. Look at them through a new lens, as I mentioned at the start, and think about how you can use them to communicate to your employees and help them. An example is a company in India who's been using their existing online communications communities that they've set up. And they've used these communities to share information and also to support one another. I think it's a great idea. One community was set up for the purpose of creating COVID-19 volunteer task forces, where within this communication, they could post issues relating to medicine or food supplies that someone locally needed during lockdown, and they could help each other out in this way. They also set up a community to help raise spirits and to engage with one another by holding online competitions. Who doesn't love competitions? One competition was for the best kids artwork. Love that. And another one was for who could do the best home cooked meal. Sharing it through their communities, and again, giving people an opportunity to connect in a very real and human way. The next tip has to do with listening to your employees by collecting their feedback. I'm sure that all or most of you do some type of employee engagement survey already, which is absolutely great. But during the crisis, it's important to adapt your feedback approach to collect information that is more timely and appropriate, keeping a pulse on what's going on with your employees. So I don't know how many of you are doing them already, but I would really encourage you to do some type of special crisis survey and ask specific questions. The added bonus of doing this is it shows your employees that you're asking and that you're listening, and it shows that you care about them. The last tip has to do with repetition, communicating to your employees over and over again to achieve your communication objectives. Now, I'm not saying to bombard your employees with information, or what you'll end up with is something called communications fatigue, but to come up with a plan to communicate messages multiple times and multiple ways. One way to do this effectively is to come up with a communications calendar. I love communications calendars that you can share with your employees. One company I spoke to, they have themed communications or activities on each day. So let's see, Monday is Leaders Motivation Monday, where they get a message from a leader. Tuesday is Thirsty for Target Tuesday, where they share company performance information. Wednesday is Wellbeing Wednesday, where they share anything people related. Thursday is Techie Thursday, where they share some updates on development. They're a techie company. And then Friday is called Full Fat Fun Friday. It's really hard to say, where they do different types of fun quizzes and stories and anything to connect people. So those are my 5 tips on communicating during the crisis. I encourage you to look at each of them and see if and how any of them can help you with your employees to communicate in a more effective way so that they can receive the important information and engage with it. Come on, go to the next slide. Sorry about that. Keep pressing and it's not doing anything. There we go. Okay, now let's move on to well-being, an area which over the years has become more important and more prominent on HR and business agendas. Why? Well, similar to engagement, we've got lots more data that shows the return on investment of well-being strategies and programs, showing how that employees can be more motivated and more engaged and help your company succeed. And while this continues to be important for businesses, during the crisis, it's evolved into something even more important and more critical, because the well-being of our employees and our businesses are being stress tested in so many different ways. And for this way, we need to put more of a focus on well-being and on the health of our workforce. On this slide, it shows, though, that we're not doing it so well. Only 49% of employees surveyed said that they felt that their company cares about their overall well-being. The good news is that it's higher than what I've seen in the past, but like the data I showed you before, there's still lots of opportunity and lots of work to be done. So let's talk about how we can do this. Let me share with you 4 things to think about and 4 tips. The first tip is to consider and address all areas of well-being, which includes physical, mental, financial, and social. Going back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs that I shared earlier, these all fall under the parts of the hierarchy in the pyramid that are on the bottom. And those areas that employees, again, are most concerned about, impacting their daily lives. And for this reason, again, the importance and the profile of each area has moved from being a nice to do to a have to do. But when deciding how to address each of these areas, it's important to start by understanding, again, the needs of your employees. Are they struggling to find ways to work out with their local gym closed? Are they having challenges with their mental health due to stresses at home and work? Are they struggling financially, or probably all of the above? By understanding where they need help, you can then come up with a plan and approach to help them best. The next thing is to think about how to make your well-being programs more accessible. And this can be done by recommunicating existing programs. You might have ones out there already that nobody knows about and nobody's using. Another way is by bringing them onto your company's intranet or your portal, making it easy for them to find and, again, to use. And another way is to reassess and possibly change some of the programs to make them more accessible in this new world. For example, I don't know if you've got an on-site gym or you have on-site yoga classes. How can you bring that virtually? How can you bring that online? Could you have some type of well-being app that people can go into and take these types of classes? Maybe you offer some type of medical care, but your employees are finding it challenging or limited to actually go talk to a doctor or see a doctor during lockdown. Instead, could you put in place some type of online doctor consultation and add that to help your employees? Bottom line, look at what you have and look at what you need to support your employees. This next tip focuses on social well-being, which goes back to an earlier point about the importance of connection. In this uncertain and challenging time, people of all ages can benefit directly from staying connected. In an article I read by Dr. Litt, who is an associate professor at the University of North Texas, they said there are risks to isolation, anxiety, unease, and missing your connections with family, friends, and others can take a toll on well-being. And adding to this, according to neuroscientists, our need to connect is as fundamental as our need for food and water. So for these reasons, it's really important for companies to increase social touch points to support the well-being of their employees. I shared a couple of examples of this in the last section when I talked about that company in India who are creating these communications communities. But there's lots of other interesting ways of companies are doing it. Some of the things that I love the most are when companies are doing things like setting up virtual games for employees to play. I led a session the other day and we played I Spy on the computer. Other companies are doing Trivial Pursuit, group exercise classes. You say it, companies are doing it just to create these new social touch points. This leads me to my final tip, which is to get creative. As the expression goes, the sky's the limit when it comes to engaging through well-being programs. In fact, this is the area where I've seen the most creativity, again, reflecting how important these programs are. Now, I wanted to share just a couple more, just to share with you how people are being creative. Let's see, one care home I spoke to, their employees are out there working in the care homes, so they're not at home. And what they're doing is every few weeks, they're bringing special hampers to the care homes for their employees to take home to make their lives a little bit easier, bringing things to them since they're too busy to go out and get it themselves. Another company I spoke to, They're letting their employees expense two family meals a day, and they'll pay 50% back. The only rule about it is that it has to be from a local restaurant, a local takeaway place. And it's a way to help their employees, but also to help the local community. Another company I spoke to is having a bake-off. I love that idea, getting everybody involved in healthy and yummy competitions. Another company I spoke to is doing virtual well-being programs covering topics such as isolation and self-distancing, how to help your children, and anything personal to their well-being. And then the final example is Walmart, big, huge multinational company. And they supported their employees from a financial perspective by giving their employees a special cash bonus. And they also accelerated their quarterly bonus to be able to help people from a financial well-being perspective. So those are my 4 tips on well-being. I can't wait to hear the creative and impactful things that you do in this area, but please do share them with me. I love hearing these ideas. So let's move on to recognition, which is a great topic to talk about after well-being, as it's not only a tool to help celebrate achievements, but it also connects each other to one another, and it makes us feel stronger and more positive, all impacting our overall well-being. And if there ever was a time for these outcomes, it's now, in this world filled of uncertainty, challenges, and again, isolation. As I like to say, recognition can give us strength, can give us hope, and can help us not just cope, but thrive and be our best. Or as a professor from University of California says, in the face of demoralization, gratitude, recognition, has the power to heal. In the face of despair, gratitude has the power to bring hope. But if you want recognition to be effective in these challenging times, as with the other areas, you need to rethink and possibly change your recognition programs. And here are 3 things that I want you to think about as you ramp up your recognition program. The first tip is to take the limits off of recognition. Think of it as training wheels on your bicycle. Take those wheels off. And what I mean by this is that too often companies limit both when and how recognition can take place. For example, they may limit recognition to, I don't know, employees of the month, employees of the quarter or the year, or they might even recognize people based off of years of service. Well, with time passing by so quickly, with small steps and small achievements meaning so much more, and for the need of connection during the crisis, our employees cannot and they should not have to wait for these moments of appreciation, these moments of recognition. They all need and they deserve to be appreciated and to be seen through recognition when it happens. I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine last week about this, and he told me that he had recognized one of his employees as Employee of the Week, which is fantastic, recognizing for their contribution. But he then told me that at the end of the week, after they had won this award, that the employee had done something else amazing and something wonderful. And I said to him, so, are you going to recognize this person again? And he said, well, no, I just made him Employee of the Week. I don't really need to do this. Well, that's actually the wrong answer, because the employee deserved to be recognized for their new contribution, knowing that what they had done was appreciated, was different than what they had done before. It'll help them be motivated. It'll help them be connected, and it shouldn't have to follow this normal recognition schedule. Next tip has to do with adapting and making tweaks in your recognition program based on the crisis, making it more topical. There's no use acting like things haven't changed. We might as well admit it. And like I've said in other areas, adapt our programs. And when it comes to recognition, it means making it more topical, more related to what we're saying and what we're doing. An example of this is a company that I spoke to who designed special recognition cards, and they sent them to their employees, and they used silly phrases like sending you virtual hugs, or high five from home, or you make working from home sweeter. And all of these reflect how you appreciate your employees in different ways and in different meanings. Another example I have is a company who had their children have a competition to draw the best recognition cards again, a fantastic way to involve your family, but also as a way to change your recognition program during the crisis. The final tip is to weave recognition into other areas, meaning to find ways to recognize people in different ways, especially now when companies are cutting or reducing budgets. It's important to find ways to make your people feel appreciated that don't necessarily have to cost money. Personally, I'm fine with this because I've never been a big fan of spending a lot of money on recognition. To me, it's more the thought that counts. One example is a company who set up recognition through their social platform. So giving people an opportunity socially to thank someone and then to get more involved in the conversation. Easy way to do it. Doesn't cost anything to do that. Another example goes back to, I mentioned a hamper that care homes had. And what they did as a way to recognize their superstars out there on the line was to have some of these special superstars help select what was in the hamper. So what a great way to say thank you, but saying you get to pick all the lovely things that go in the hamper. So those are my 3 ways that you can ramp up your recognition program. Think about how you can take them back and do them in your organization so your employees will feel appreciated, stay strong, and be their best. So the final area of employee engagement that I wanted to talk about in this webinar are managers and the changing role that they have, and actually I believe that they will continue to have because of the crisis. I've saved this for last, since everything I've said so far in respect to every other area won't happen without the support of your managers. You need them now more than any other times. So I wanted to share with you 3 things to think about when you think about the changing roles of your managers. So the first tip is to make sure that your managers are clear on their expectations. So what do you expect from them and what do you need from them in order to manage their teams? Explain that more than ever, they are the linchpin. They are the connection between their employees and their company. And they really need to play a more active role in doing this, going above and beyond what they've done in the past. And I know they do a lot already, so it is a lot to expect of them. Speaking of expectations, I thought I would share 6 different expectations. You can go back and share these with your managers if you want. The first is about leading with compassion. Compassionate managers are those who lead from within. They have the ability to inspire through encouragement and empowerment. One of my favorite quotes is from Maya Angelou, and she says, "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And that's exactly how a compassionate leader leads. The next tip is related to compassion. It's about leading with empathy, being able to understand the feelings, the concerns, and needs of your employees. If there was ever a time that this was important, it's now. Making sure that you understand and you show them that you care. Next tip is about being human, something that I talk a lot about when I lead workshops with managers. It's about being vulnerable. It's about being imperfect and showing your human side. And again, this is even more important so that your employees see the human side of you as a manager and open up and ask for support when they need it. Next is being authentic, which, similar to the last tip, is about managers removing any type of masks or facades that they have, letting their employees see exactly who they are, the authentic person. And by role modeling this and all the other behaviors, it lets people act this way, the employees who work for them. 5th tip goes back to communications and the important role that managers have when it comes to communications. They really need to step up when it comes to communications, whether it's daily huddles or daily or weekly one-on-ones, whatever it takes to let that person know that they are connected and that they know what's going on in the business and that they're supported. And it's not just the when, so daily, weekly, or whatever, but it's also how they communicate, how the managers communicate, and how they connect with their employees. They need to connect not just on work matters, but they need to do it on personal matters, which might not be normal or comfortable for managers, but it's really important with the blur between home and work right now to know what's going on. And then the final tip goes back to recognition and how important it is for managers to recognize, to appreciate, to say thank you to their employees. They need to hear from their manager how they're doing. And as my husband, who is a manager, said to me just the other day, He said, it shows my employees that although we are not physically working together, I still see them and I still appreciate them. I love it. Okay, so next tip is about giving your managers the tools and support to be effective. You can't just say, here, go and do it. You need to figure out what they need to be their very best. Do they need training? Do they need conversations with you? Do they need additional tools? What exactly do they need to be the best that they can? My suggestion would be to map out what are the new expectations of your managers, and then assess the skills of your management team, and then share with them tools that, again, help them be their best. The last tip has to do with the work that we do and the need for managers to reevaluate and deconstruct work and priorities. Now, what I mean by this, it means that it's important for managers to know when and how to pivot, to change, to flex, based off of their understanding and assessment of what work needs to be done. And I'm going to give you 2 examples of this. One came from a friend of mine who told me that during the first week of lockdown, during lockdown, they were told to complete 3 goals in the same amount of time during the crisis. However, due to system constraints, they could only get into the system for about 3 hours a day, but they were still being asked to do the same thing. You can imagine how they felt. They were stressed, they were worried, they were concerned that it would impact their overall performance. And in this instance, the manager really should have understood and reevaluated their job and their priorities and decided what was important based off of these hurdles and limitations. Another example, one of my neighbors with these children has 3 children, and she told me that she was being asked to work core hours. And if she couldn't work core hours, well, then she would have to go on unpaid leave. Now, in this instance, the manager really should have stepped away from time and looked more about what did she need this person to do and focus more on the results. Because this employee was very open to the idea of working around her children's schedule and working with her partner to share hours and share children. And the manager really should have figured out a way to reevaluate the job, deconstruct it, and make sure to support the employees, but also to get the work done. The point of this tip is to give your managers permission to adopt a more flexible approach to work during these challenging times, understanding that normal no longer exists and that we all need to adopt a new approach to how work gets done. And it can only happen if managers understand and then give their employees permission to do this and to support them. Okay, I want to make sure I leave time for questions. So I'm going to leave you with 6 final tips and then open it to questions. The first tip is about living your company values, something that I write about in my most recent book. Values are such a critical business tool, and they guide the direction of our employees and our business. And with so much confusion and uncertainty right now, it's even more important to live your values, showing your employees and even your customers that even in hard times, your values are important and they drive your mission, your purpose, and how you treat your people. Second tip is about ripping up the rule book. As Albert Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same results. We cannot expect that what we always did, as I said before, will work. We need to rip up the rule books and try new things to meet the new needs of our people and our businesses. The next tip relates to this, and it's about not worrying about perfection. If we are ever going to be agile and try new things, we need to move away from this idea about perfectionism. My husband, going back to my husband, he's a developer, and they, as developers, they deal with this whole agile approach all the time, getting things out there, even when it's not perfect, and stress testing it. And that's exactly what we can do. If there's ever a time where our employees will understand that it's not perfect, now is the time, and they appreciate whatever we're doing to help them, again, even if it's not perfect. Next, I heard someone say this on a podcast the other day, we need to embrace the chaos. I love it. There's no hiding. We definitely need to admit that we're in chaos and maybe look at it a different way. Try to see opportunities, as I mentioned it before, and possibilities in the chaos. And again, I've seen some really good examples of companies embracing the chaos and doing things that they never had done in the past, which relates to my next tip, about don't just go back to the old ways. If you're doing some really great things, some really innovative things, when things get back to normal, well, the new normal, don't just automatically go back to the old ways. Think about how some of these new ways could work, assess what worked before, assess what works now, and come up with a new plan. And the final tip, I thought I should talk about the future in the final tip, which is to start thinking about returning to work. Yay. We don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know where it's going to happen, but I don't know about you. I'm already starting to map this out. As a matter of fact, I'm trying to put together a return to work checklist just to help people, just to try to think about all the things that you need to do. But there's no harm in starting to do this yourself, so that when it all happens, you will have thought through some of the challenges that you're going to face. So that's it. I want to thank you for your time, and I guess we should open it up for questions now.
Thanks, Debra, for such an engrossing session. I think the inputs that you shared is going to add a lot of value. It actually makes me feel amazing that some of the main areas of employee engagement around motivation, empowerment, alignment, communication, and well-being are some of those things which form the premise and the foundation of our product Impulse. That's one of our product that we have with Xoxoday. I think we so well have developed and designed this product that it actually helps us to meet and address all of these areas in the space of employee engagement. Now, coming to the questions, I do have some really interesting ones with me, and I'm going to, in the interest of time and to see how many questions, the more we can take, the better for us and for everybody else, I'm going to combine some of the questions to put it across to you, and I would be happy to listen to your thoughts. So I'm combining the question that I got from Supriya and Suchita, which primarily talks about two different areas. So the question would be that how do you check on the productivity of people while working from home without hurting their sentiments? And the other aspect of that would be, how do you really get the management focus on the area of talent well-being, where primarily the leadership focuses on business growth? So these are two contradictory pieces of the same piece, but the two different sides of one coin. So I would like you to take this question in totality. One, how do we check on the employees' productivity without impacting their emotions? And second, how leadership most of the time would talk about the business growth. How do you get them to focus on the areas of talent?
Great. Okay. So first one, great question. I love that question. We could spend a whole hour talking about that. The bit about checking in and productivity, I think the first thing, and I heard someone use these words the other day, that we need to make sure managers understand that you're checking in and not checking up. So it goes back to that idea of trust and having a conversation with their employees, checking in and being very clear about what you expect of them and how they're delivering. The best way to understand productivity is to have these check-ins and to understand, are you being productive? What have you done? What are the hurdles? What are the roadblocks, so that the employee sees the manager is helping them be productive. But the clearer you are about what the goals are, the easier it is to see how people are being productive. You don't have to be in an office sitting next to someone to know how productive they are. As a matter of fact, I think people are having better conversations since they've been into lockdown, because they've been spending more quality time talking about productivity and how to do it. As far as managers, the most important thing for them to understand the growth and how they're going to do growth is to understand how talent will help them. And that's why I wanted to share as much as possible with you guys today, just to show how you're never going to get growth if your employees are not well. If all your employees are doing is focusing on those bottom parts of the pyramid and the hierarchy, they're never going to be able to focus on getting work done, and they're never going to be focusing on productivity. So from a selfish perspective as a manager, the more you can support those fundamental areas, the more they can be themselves, push the boundaries, and be the best that they can be to help the company to grow and succeed. That being said, I think we need to be realistic and realize that it can be challenging in these times to be 100%. I've seen a lot of conversations on this. And, you know, if people are dealing with a lot, they might not be 100%. And you know what? I think that's fine. And I think we need to respect it, because they will get through it. But if we push too hard, they'll never get through it. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Debra. I'm going to now combine three questions that came in from Chandra Venkatraman. Now, it is primarily or on the area of employee communication, and the premise of the question is that there is a lot of conversation or a lot of webinars promoting the concept of leaders over communicating during this period. Now, the question has three portions to it. One, what would be the right mix of connecting with the time? What would be the right mix of how frequently should we connect with the employees? How frequently should we collect the feedback from the employees? And do you think that this over communication in such time could be a strong, could be a point of strong dissonance with the employees? What is your opinion on that?
You know, my first part about the frequency, actually, my answer is no different now than it is in a crisis, in that I think you need to understand what your employees want and your employees need. Some of my employees might want and need to talk to me every single day. They need that type of connection. Other employees, they might be happy talking every once a week and doing it over email. So I don't think there's a one size fits all. I truly believe that managers really need to take the time to understand what your employees need and what's going to help them get through it. So sorry, I don't have a perfect answer to that. I think the same thing with feedback. I don't think there is a right or wrong answer. For me, what I would do is I would do a special short pulse survey, find out what the answers are, see how big the problems are. So if you get the survey back and you've got like 10 problems, I would probably follow up and do another survey on one or more of them. If you get the survey back and you find that there's really only one area that you need to focus on, in that situation, I'd go back to my employees and say, this is what you said that you need, and this is what I'm going to do. So I think it really depends on what you hear from your employees. For me, the biggest thing about feedback surveys is to very quickly go back to them and tell them that you heard them, and then very, very quickly go back and tell them what you're going to do about it. By doing that, they'll be more open to being engaged with more frequent surveys. But let them know why you're doing this. You know, I would say, you know, we're all going through crisis with times changing very quickly. And for that reason, you know what? I'm probably going to come to you every week or so with a couple questions just so I can see how things are changing. But see what the results come back as.
Great. Thanks, Debra. The next question that I have is from Nishita Sharma. And the question is, can coronavirus be an opportunity to redefine our business?
Definitely. And I think, you know, I'm not a business leader. I'm an HR business leader. I wear both hats. But what I'm seeing a lot of businesses doing, and I know I'm even doing it for myself, is taking a step back and thinking about, is what I'm doing going to work going forward? So, you know, I know, like, you know, Taruna, for you guys, you know, you do surveys. You've decided to do special pulse surveys. You've redefined what you need to do to support your customers. And I would encourage every business to think about, how do you need to change your products? How do you need to change your services to support people in this new world? And similarly, from a people perspective, that's what we should be doing. We should be taking a step back and redefining, what does employee engagement, as I said before, mean, and what do we need to do differently? But I think it's a great opportunity just to take stock, take a step back, breathe for a moment, and think about what you can do differently and more effectively.
Thanks, Debra. And in the interest of time, I'll just take one last question. While the other questions, we can send it over to you over an email, and maybe you can respond back and we can share it with the participants. So the last question that I'm picking up right now came in from Ashish, where he says that most oftenly, when we talk about the employees in an organization, we use the word talent as against just talking about employee. And most of the time we relate when it comes to talking about the employee, we always refer it's a talent in the organization. But when it comes to talking about their experience or engagement, we say it is employee engagement or employee experience. Why it cannot be termed as talent engagement or talent experience? It's a tricky question, but definitely a nice one.
You know, I've never been asked that question before. I'm often asked, why do you call it employee engagement? Some people just don't like that word. They like employee experience or whatever. I don't get hung up on words, I have to say. I think talent is a lovely way of looking at it. It's a nice thing to say that you think every single person in your organization is a talent. But some people call their employees people. Google calls them Googlers. To me, it doesn't matter. You can call them humans. But yeah, I'm not bothered by the word that you use, as long as you treat these individuals in the right way. So sorry, I have to think about that one. I've never been asked that before.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting twist. I think,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of starting using of this terminology, and I'm sure it'll eventually gain momentum. So maybe starting with you, I think you can start using that in your books as a new term that you introduce, and I'm sure it's going to gain a lot of momentum.
Well, I'm
So
already
I think
starting
I'll
to
just
think
squeeze
about,
in one
oh, go ahead.
last question,
Hmm.
which talks. No, no, sorry. Please go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I just thought I'll just squeeze in one last question, which came in from Chandra Kishore, and he was checking on, is there a possibility that we can merge employee engagement with training, wherein we can do the TNA, training need analysis, and and basis that we can design the engagement calendar, and then we can have the engagement tool to support the overall training. So how do you think this whole model of combining the training with employee engagement and having the training need identification as the base of engagement work?
I think that I didn't share with you my engagement model, but in the engagement model, there's 10 elements, and training and learning is one of the 10 elements. So I think it's definitely integral, because training and learning supports all of our employees. Training and learning drives engagement. But I do think that it's one of the 10 elements, one of the 10 levers that we have to engage our employees. I think that it is a part, but if I was thinking of a hierarchy, I think I would have engagement on the top and learning and training again as one of the levers.
Right, and I think too, and I agree with you on that, Debra, because primarily engagement completes the overall life cycle, covers the life cycle of an employee, and without understanding the training needs of a person, I think it will not be enough for us to just drive engagement. So yes, there is some or the other way, there's a direct or an indirect correlation between training and development and doing the engagement for an employee. Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Debra, I think it was very, very engaging a session. I think the insights you shared made a lot of meaning to all of us. I am sure all of us have learned a lot, and everybody I know is looking forward for the handouts and the PDFs to refer and eventually see what difference they can bring about in the workforce. So thank you so much for taking our time and connecting with us. Thank you to all the participants for making this session a success. I think the questions were extremely wonderful, amazing, and I think it made us all think a little bit more than what we normally would. So thank you so much. Also, I would like to thank Gilbert from Philippines, who happens to be the Xoxoday partner out there. Gilbert, thank you so much for taking your time and joining along with your team to add more value to this session. The questions that were not answered in this session, we will be passing it on to Debra for her to respond over an email, and then will be passed on back to the people who raised those questions. So
fantastic. And if anybody has any other questions, by all means, just let me know. Just contact me through LinkedIn.
Right, we'll do that. Great, Debra. Thank you so much. Thank you all the participants for making this session a success. I look forward of having many more such forums where we can engage and exchange our thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thanks.